He was only 4 years old when his childhood was sold for a loan worth just a few hundred rupees. By the time he turned 12, he was standing on stages, telling the world that slavery still chained children like him. And within months, he would be dead for it. This is the story of Iqbal Masih. It matters because it shows what happens when power feeds on silence, and what can happen when even a child refuses to stay quiet. At stake was not only his life, but the lives of countless children hidden in the same dark prisons. The stage was Pakistan in the 1980s and 1990s. His family lived in Muridke, a small town in Punjab, among one of the country's poorest Christian communities. Poverty was everywhere. Families lived day to day, wages were scarce, and debt hung over every meal. Across Pakistan, millions of children were trapped in bonded labor, in fields, brick kilns, and factories. The carpet industry was among the worst. To outsiders, a hand-woven rug was a luxury. To the children who knotted the threads, it was a chain. The system was brutal. A family in need took a loan, called peshki, from an employer. In return, they pledged their labor, or more often their children's, until the debt was repaid. But the debt was never meant to be repaid. Interest piled on top of interest. Fees were charged for tools. Fines were added for mistakes. Deductions were taken for food. A child could work 14 hours a day and still see the debt grow larger. Laws existed on paper, but in reality, the police often sided with factory owners. For children, the factory was a cage. For parents, it was a trap they could never escape. Iqbal was born in 1983, the fourth child in a poor Christian family. His father left when he was young, leaving his mother, Inayat, to raise the children mostly on her own. To feed them, she worked odd jobs, often relying on her older daughters. Food was scarce, money even scarcer. When Iqbal was 4, the family made a decision that would shape his life. They borrowed 600 rupees from the owner of a carpet factory. In return, Iqbal would work until the debt was cleared. But debts like this were never cleared. What began as 600 grew into an amount no child could repay. Some tell his story as if it was about religion, because his family was Christian in a Muslim-majority country. But bonded labor was not about faith. It was about poverty. Muslim, Hindu, and Christian families alike fell into the same trap. The system cared nothing for belief, only for keeping the poor in chains. Life in the factory was harsh. Children crouched for hours over wooden looms, knotting threads into intricate patterns. The rooms were dark, the air thick with dust. Iqbal worked 12 to 14 hours a day, his small hands tying thousands of knots. If he slowed down, he was beaten. If he made mistakes, the debt grew larger. He was given little food and even less freedom. Imagine him there, watching seasons change only through cracks in the window, hearing other children playing in the streets while he bent over a loom. His childhood traded not for comfort, but for survival that never came. These were his early years. Not games, not lessons, but hands rubbed raw from yarn and eyes straining in dim light. Many children grew old in those rooms without ever stepping free. That was the design. Keep them working, keep them owing, keep them silent. But even as a small boy, Iqbal was not fully silent. He saw the injustice. He felt the weight of it. And deep inside, the first cracks formed. A quiet awareness that life was not meant to be lived in chains. By the time he was 10, news reached the factories that a new law had been passed. The the Bonded Labor System Abolition Act of 1992. On paper, it made bonded labor illegal, debts unenforceable, and children free to walk away. For most, the law changed nothing. Factory owners ignored it. Police sided with employers. But for Iqbal, it was a spark. He tried to escape. The first attempt failed. When he reached the police, instead of freedom, he was sent back. Owners paid bribes. Police collected finder's fees. And the boy was returned to the same floor. For trying to run, he was beaten harder, watched closer. But that attempt planted something inside him. If a law existed, then the chains were not natural. If he had been returned once, he could try again. On his second escape, he reached people who believed him. Activists from the Bonded Labor Liberation Front, or BLLF. They took him in, gave him food, shelter, and for the first time, a classroom. He learned fast. The BLLF gave him more than freedom. They gave him a voice. They took him to rallies, to meetings where villagers and workers gathered. At first, he was just a small boy standing at the edge. But when he spoke, people listened. He didn't use polished speeches. He spoke as someone who had lived it. When he told them he had been only 4 years old when he was chained to a loom, people cried. More and more Pakistanis began to support him. Families in villages, workers in unions, even journalists stood with him. They saw not just a boy, but a symbol of what poverty had stolen from thousands. Iqbal learned quickly that laws mattered only if people defended them, that a child's voice could move adults, and that silence was the true weapon of the oppressor. By speaking, he had already broken the first chain. Once freed, he threw himself into education with a hunger that startled even his teachers. In just 2 years, he caught up on what most children learned in a decade. He wasn't simply studying for himself. He was preparing to fight for those still trapped. Through the BLLF, he began visiting villages and factories, helping to free other children. It is said that he helped liberate more than 3,000 boys and girls. The exact number is disputed, but whether hundreds or thousands, his courage gave others a path to follow. By 1994, he was traveling abroad. In Sweden, he told audiences about the loom and the beatings. In the United States, he warned that carpets in their homes might have been woven by children like him. For a boy barely over 4 feet tall, his words carried enormous weight. That same year, he received the Reebok Youth in Action Award. On that stage, he said he was just one child among many, and that his fight was not finished. The applause was thunderous, but behind the honor was danger. He was no longer anonymous. He was a public figure, threatening the profits of a powerful industry. In Pakistan, those industries were not faceless. They were men with money, connections, and influence. The carpet mafia. They did not take kindly to a 12-year-old who could stand on a stage in America and put their business in shame. Rumors spread that he was being watched. Some said strangers followed him. Others claimed threats were whispered to the BLLF. It is hard to know how much was true, but the tension was real. At the same time, ordinary people rallied to his side. Villagers, workers, and students who heard him speak stood with him. The carpet mafia had money, but Iqbal had something stronger: sympathy, solidarity, and truth. He had turned his pain into a weapon sharper than any blade: his voice. But with each speech, the risk grew heavier. The boy once sold for 600 rupees now stood against an industry worth millions. And those who profit from silence rarely forgive the ones who break it. By the spring of 1995, Iqbal was 12. He had already lived two lives, one as a child slave bent over a loom, the other as a boy whose words carried across continents. His years in the factory had left his body small, stunted from malnutrition. His growing fame made him a target. The threats were not vague. The carpet industry had reason to silence him. Yet he refused to stop. He spoke in schools. He told journalists bonded labor must end. And he dreamed of becoming a lawyer to fight the system in court. Then came April 16th, 1995. That afternoon, he was riding his bicycle home from church with his cousin in Meridki when gunfire struck. He fell to the ground, killed instantly. He was 12 years old. The details of his murder remain disputed. Many, including his allies at the BLLF, declared the carpet mafia had ordered it. Others suggested different causes. The truth has never been settled. But what is certain is that his activism had drawn enemies powerful enough to want him gone, and his death silenced one of the bravest voices in Pakistan. The cost was immense. His family lost a son. The children he inspired lost their champion. Pakistan lost a voice that dared to speak against an industry of silence. Yet his death did not erase what he had done. In the days after, grief turned into anger. Crowds gathered, demanding justice. For many who had only heard about child labor in passing, his murder made the cruelty undeniable. They mourned not just the boy, but what he represented. The courage to say what others were too afraid to speak. The government came under pressure. International media covered his story. Human rights groups spoke louder. Carpet exporters faced questions abroad. The industry had tried to keep bonded labor invisible. Now it was in the open, carried on the face of a 12-year-old who had refused to bow. In the years that followed, his name did not fade. Schools were named after him. Awards were created in his honor, including the Iqbal Masih Award for the elimination of child labor in the United States. His story entered classrooms, campaigns, and children's books. Across the world, he became a symbol of the fight against child slavery. And in Pakistan, despite the dangers, many continued his work. Activists and villagers remembered that he had been one of their own. They carried his story into new protests and raids on factories. He had shown that speaking out was possible, even for someone born without wealth or power. Today, debates about bonded labor in South Asia still continue. Some argue over how many children he freed. Some argue about who killed him. What cannot be argued is that he changed how the world saw child slavery. He dragged something hidden in shadows into daylight. If you pause for a moment, you can picture him. A small boy on a bicycle, riding home under the sun, carrying more courage than most men hold in a lifetime. His life was brief, but its weight far greater than his years. And that weight leaves us with a truth. Power does not only belong to the rich, the armed, or the old. Sometimes it belongs to a child who refuses to bow his head, even when the world tells him to stay silent.